Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UE's Liberty, staring at the glowing screen in front of him. The message had arrived just 3 hours ago, and he still could not believe what he was reading. After 20 years of war, the aliens. Wanted Peace. Commander Lisa Martinez walked up beside him. She was the ship's language expert and had spent the last 2 hours checking the translation over and over again. Her face looked tired but excited. "It's real, Captain," she said softly. "The Zephyrians are speaking for all 5 alien races. They want to meet and talk about ending the war." Jake shook his head slowly. The war had been going on since he was just a young officer. Millions of humans had died fighting the hegemony. The 5 alien races had worked together to push humanity back to just a few dozen star systems. Earth itself had been attacked twice. "Why now?" Jake asked. "We've been losing this war for years. Why would they suddenly want peace?" Lisa looked at the message again. "They say they're tired of fighting too. Too many of their people have died. They want to meet on Kepler 438b. It's a neutral moon that neither side controls." Jake knew the place. It was a small rocky moon orbiting a gas giant. No one lived there because it was too cold and had no air. But it was exactly halfway between human space and the main hegemony worlds. The communication system beeped, and Admiral Patricia Hayes appeared on the main screen. She was calling from Earth Command, and she looked as surprised as Jake felt. "Captain Morrison," Admiral Hayes said, "I assume you've read the alien message. What do you think?" Jake thought carefully before answering. "It could be a trap, Admiral. But if there's even a small chance for real peace—" "My thoughts exactly," the Admiral replied. "We're putting together a delegation. I want you to transport them to the meeting. We're sending our best people." Over the next few hours, Jake learned who would be coming on a ship. Dr. Nathan Blake was Earth's top expert on alien biology. He had studied every alien race in the hegemony and understood how they thought. General Rick Sullivan was one of Earth's most experienced military commanders. He had fought the aliens on a dozen different worlds. Ambassador Claire Roberts would lead the talks. She was known for being tough, but fair in negotiations. She had helped write the peace treaties that ended the civil wars on Mars and Europa. But the person who worried Jake the most was Amy Watson. She was an intelligence analyst who spent her time studying alien communications and fleet movements. Amy had requested a private meeting with Jake before they left Earth. "Captain," Amy said when they met in his office, "I've been looking at the data from the last few months. Something doesn't feel right." Jake sat down across from her. Amy was young but very smart. She had predicted 3 major alien attacks in the past year just by studying their communication patterns. "What do you mean?" Jake asked. Amy pulled out a data tablet and showed him several charts. "Look at these fleet movements. The aliens have been moving ships around, but not in ways that make sense if they really want peace." The charts showed alien ships gathering in strange places. Instead of pulling back from human territory, they seemed to be spreading out and hiding in asteroid fields and empty space. "Maybe they're just being careful," Jake suggested. "If this peace talk fails, they want to be ready to fight again." Amy shook her head. "It's more than that. They're positioning ships near all of our major colonies. And look at this." She showed him another chart. "They've been sending a lot more coded messages in the last week. The kind they usually send before big attacks." Jake studied the information. Amy's concerns made sense, but he also knew how important this peace chance was. "Have you shown this to Admiral Hayes?" "I tried," Amy said, looking frustrated. "But everyone is so excited about the peace talks that they don't want to hear anything negative. They think I'm just being paranoid." Jake understood. After 20 years of war, everyone wanted to believe that peace was possible. The idea that it might be a trick was too painful to consider. "Keep watching the data," Jake told Amy. "If you see anything else suspicious, let me know immediately." 2 days later, the delegation boarded the U.S. Liberty. Dr. Blake seemed nervous but hopeful. General Sullivan looked like he expected trouble, but was ready for anything. Ambassador Roberts was calm and professional, already studying files about alien culture and history. As they prepared to leave Earth's orbit, Jake received a final message from Admiral Hayes. "The whole human race is counting on this mission. Captain, bring our people home safely." Jake looked out at the stars ahead of them. Somewhere out there, 5 alien races were supposedly ready to end a war that had lasted 2 decades. Either humanity was about to achieve the greatest diplomatic victory in its history, or they were flying straight into the most dangerous trap ever set. The U.S. Liberty turned away from Earth and jumped into hyperspace, carrying humanity's hopes toward an uncertain future. Behind them, Amy Watson continued to study the alien communications, finding more and more signs that something terrible was being planned out as they traveled through the dark space between stars. None of them knew that the Zephyrians had been planning this moment for months. The peace treaty was real, but it was designed to do one thing: get humanity's leaders far away from Earth so they could be eliminated all at once. The trap was already set. Soon, they would all learn the true cost of hoping for peace with an enemy that had never intended to honor any agreement. The U.S. Liberty dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler 438b, and Jake Morrison felt his breath catch in his throat. The small moon looked exactly as he remembered from the star charts, but now it was surrounded by the most beautiful structures he had ever seen. Crystal towers rose from the moon's surface, gleaming in the light of the distant star. They seemed to grow naturally from the rock, like frozen waterfalls reaching toward space. Between the towers, bridges of pure light connected, floating platforms where ships from all 5 alien races waited in perfect formation. "It's incredible," Dr. Nathan Blake whispered, pressing his face against the observation window. "They built all of this just for the peace talks?" Commander Lisa Martinez was busy translating the incoming messages from the alien ships. "They're welcoming us, Captain. The Zephyrian ambassador Kethter wants to meet with our delegation immediately." Jake nodded and gave orders to dock with the main platform. As they approached, he could see representatives from all 5 hegemony races waiting for them. The Zephyrians looked like tall, thin humans, but with blue-gray skin and large black eyes. The Thrakari were shorter and covered in scales that changed color as they moved. The other 3 races were stranger still, with forms that barely looked like anything from Earth. Ambassador Claire Roberts straightened her formal diplomatic uniform and checked her translator device one last time. "Remember," she told the delegation, "we're here to end a war, not start new arguments. Stay calm and professional, no matter what they say." General Rick Sullivan adjusted his military dress uniform, but kept his hand near his sidearm. Old habits from 20 years of fighting were hard to break. "I still don't like this," he muttered. Too many of their ships around for a peace meeting. Dr. Blake was practically bouncing with excitement. This was the first time any human had been invited to meet peacefully with all 5 alien races at once. For a scientist who had spent his career studying them from a distance, it was like a dream come true. The docking was smooth, and soon the human delegation was walking through corridors made of the same crystal material as the towers. The walls seemed to glow with their own inner light, and the air smelled of something like flowers, but cleaner and sharper. Ambassador Kethter met them in a large circular chamber at the heart of the complex. The Zephyrian was tall, even for his species, with intricate silver patterns tattooed on his blue skin. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly warm and musical. "Welcome, humans," Kethter said through the translation devices. "We are honored that you have come so far to discuss peace between our peoples. Claire stepped forward and bowed slightly, as she had practiced. We are grateful for this opportunity, Ambassador. Humanity hopes that we can find a way to end the suffering on both sides. The negotiations began immediately. The aliens had prepared detailed proposals covering everything from territorial boundaries to trade agreements. As the hours passed, Claire found herself amazed at how reasonable their demands seemed. The Zephyrians offered to give up 3-star systems that humanity had thought were lost forever. The Shakari proposed trade routes that would benefit both species. Even the most aggressive alien race, the Krulon, seemed willing to establish peaceful borders. But Jake noticed things that bothered him. From his position in the observer area, he could see energy readings on his portable scanner that didn't match what the aliens claimed about their defensive systems. The numbers suggested much more powerful weapons than anything needed for protection. Dr. Blake was taking notes constantly, studying every alien gesture and expression. He noticed that the delegates from different species kept looking at each other in ways that seemed nervous rather than confident. They would whisper in their own languages when they thought the humans weren't paying attention. On the second day of talks, Claire successfully negotiated an agreement about mining rights in disputed asteroid fields. The aliens accepted terms that were so favorable to humanity that General Sullivan pulled her aside during a break. "This is too easy," he said quietly. "In 20 years of war, they never gave up anything without a massive fight. Now they're handing us everything we ask for?" Claire looked tired but hopeful. Maybe they really are as tired of fighting as they claim. War is expensive for them too. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Amy Watson was having trouble sleeping. The alien communications she had been monitoring were getting stranger by the hour. Instead of the normal military chatter, she was seeing coded messages that used patterns she had never encountered before. She tried again to contact the delegation on the UES Liberty, but every attempt was blocked by what the communication system called solar interference. Amy knew enough about space weather to understand that there was no solar storm happening anywhere near Kepler 438b. "They're jamming our communications," she told her supervisor for the 3rd time that week. "Something is very wrong." Her supervisor, Commander Paul Hayes, looked at her with tired eyes. The entire intelligence division had been working overtime since the peace talks began. "Amy, you've been saying that for days. Maybe the interference is from all the alien technology around that moon." Amy pulled up her charts again. "Sir, look at these fleet movements. While our people are talking peace, alien ships are moving into attack positions around every major human colony. They're even building up forces near Earth." Commander Hayes studied the data more carefully this time. Amy was young, but she was also very good at her job. "If you're right, why would they do this during peace talks?" "Because the peace talks are cover for something else," Amy said. "I think they're planning to attack while our guard is down." Back on Kepler 438b, the 3rd day of negotiations was going even better than the 2nd. The aliens agreed to establish neutral zones around sensitive star systems. They offered to share some of their medical technology to help with human diseases. They even proposed cultural exchange programs. Ambassador Roberts was beginning to believe that real peace might actually be possible. As she prepared for another day of talks, she felt more hopeful than she had in years. Dr. Blake had filled 3 notebooks with observations about alien behavior and biology. He was particularly interested in the way different species work together. Despite their very different appearances and cultures, they seemed to have genuine respect for each other. Jake Morrison returned to his ship each night with growing unease. His sensors continued to detect energy signatures that didn't match what the aliens claimed about their peaceful intentions. But when he mentioned his concerns to General Sullivan, the general reminded him that aliens had every right. to defend themselves during negotiations. None of them knew that hidden hegemony fleets were already moving into final attack positions throughout human space. The peace talks had served their purpose perfectly, keeping humanity's attention focused on hope, while their enemies prepared to eliminate them once and for all. The signing ceremony was scheduled for the next day. Across human space, people were celebrating the end of the longest war in their history. Earth's news networks were calling it the greatest diplomatic achievement since humanity first reached the stars. But in the deep space around every human world, alien ships waited in the darkness for the signal to begin the final attack. Ambassador Claire Roberts picked up the ceremonial pen and smiled at the cameras recording this historic moment. Around her, representatives from all 5 alien races watched as she prepared to sign the peace treaty that would end 20 years of war for humanity and for peace, she said, and wrote her name on the glowing document. The moment her signature was complete, everything changed. The crystal chamber filled with a harsh red light as alarm systems activated throughout the alien complex. Ambassador Kefter's friendly expression disappeared, replaced by something cold and cruel. "Thank you, Ambassador Roberts," the Zephyrian said, his musical voice now sharp with satisfaction. "You have just signed humanity's surrender." Before Claire could react, the chamber's windows became transparent, showing the space around. Kepler 438b. Dozens of alien warships that had been hidden behind the moon suddenly appeared. Their weapons already charging to fire. Captain Jake Morrison felt the UES Liberty shake as enemy fire struck their shields. On his bridge, warning lights flashed red, and his crew scrambled to battle stations. "All human ships, this is Liberty." Jake broadcast on emergency frequencies. "We are under attack." Repeat, the peace talks were a trap. Commander Lisa Martinez tried desperately to send a warning to Earth, but her communications were being jammed by powerful alien transmitters. "Captain, I can't get through. They're blocking everything." The 3 human escort ships that had accompanied them to the peace talks were already taking heavy damage. The aliens had positioned their fleet perfectly, surrounding the humans with overwhelming firepower. In the crystal chamber, General Rick Sullivan drew his sidearm and moved to protect Ambassador Roberts. But energy shields had activated around the alien delegates, making them untouchable. "Did you really think we wanted peace?" Kefter laughed. "This war was never about territory or resources. It was about making sure humanity never becomes strong enough to challenge us." Dr. Nathan Blake stared in shock as the truth became clear. "You planned this from the beginning." The whole peace conference was designed to get our leaders away from Earth. "Very good, Doctor," the Zephyrian ambassador replied. "While your government and military commanders are here with us, our fleets are attacking every human world simultaneously. By the time this day ends, your species will be extinct or enslaved." Claire felt sick as she realized what her signature had really meant. The document wasn't a peace treaty at all. It was a formal surrender that could be used to justify the complete destruction of humanity. On the UES Liberty, Jake was fighting the battle of his life. His ship was outnumbered 10-1, and more alien vessels were arriving every minute. But he refused to give up. "All power to weapons," he ordered. "If we're going down, we're taking some of them with us." The Liberty's guns blazed, and one of the smaller alien ships exploded in a ball of fire. But for every enemy ship they damaged, 2 more took its place. Meanwhile, across human space, the hegemony's real plan was unfolding. Hidden fleets that had been positioned during the peace talks suddenly attacked every major human colony. On New Texas, families were eating breakfast when alien warships appeared in the sky and began bombing cities. The colonists had no warning and no time to escape. Proxima Station, humanity's largest mining facility, was destroyed in the first wave of attacks. 3 million people died in minutes as the station's fusion reactors overloaded. Even Earth itself was under assault. Admiral Patricia Hayes watched in horror from Earth Command as enemy ships emerged from hyperspace around the home planet. The orbital defense platforms that had protected Earth for decades were overwhelmed in the first hour of fighting. How? Did we miss this? Admiral Hayes asked her staff. How did they get so many ships into position without us seeing them? Amy Watson finally got her answer to weeks of suspicious alien communications. The coded messages hadn't been random chatter. They had been detailed coordination instructions for the largest military operation in galactic history. They've been planning this for months, Amy reported to Admiral Hayes. Every peace proposal, every negotiation delay, it was all designed to give them time to position their fleets. Back on Kepler 438b, the human delegation was trapped in the crystal chamber as the battle raged outside. General Sullivan had managed to contact the Liberty, but there was nothing Jake could do to rescue them. Captain, Sullivan's voice crackled over the radio. Forget about us. Get out of here and warn Earth if you can. Jake gritted his teeth as another hit shook his ship. I'm not leaving you, General. That's an order, Captain. Someone has to survive to tell humanity what really happened here. Dr. Blake was studying the alien technology around them, looking for any weakness they could exploit. The energy shields protecting the aliens were powerful, but they were also connected to the chamber's main power system. If I can overload the power grid, Blake told the others, it might bring down their shields long enough for us to fight back. Claire was still staring at the fake treaty she had signed. This is all my fault. I should have seen through their lies. No, General Sullivan said firmly. They fooled all of us. Even our best intelligence experts thought this was real. Outside the chamber, the battle was going badly for the humans. 2 of their escort ships had been destroyed, and the Liberty was badly damaged. Jake's crew was fighting bravely, but they couldn't hold out much longer against such overwhelming odds. Then something strange appeared on the Liberty's sensors. New ships were approaching the battlefield, but they weren't human or from any of the hegemony races. The energy signatures were completely unknown. Captain, his sensor operator called out, I'm reading massive ships coming in from the outer system. They're huge, sir. Bigger than anything we've ever seen. Jake looked at the display and felt his heart skip a beat. The approaching vessels were enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest human battleship. And there were dozens of them. Ambassador Kefter noticed the same thing. His confident expression began to change to one of concern as his own sensors detected the mysterious fleet. Who are they? One of the Thrakari delegates asked nervously. Kefter was frantically checking communications from his own ships. I don't know. They're not responding to our hails. The unknown ships reached the edge of the battle zone and suddenly opened fire. But they weren't shooting at the humans. Their massive weapons struck the hegemony vessels with devastating force. Dr. Blake watched through the chamber windows as alien ships that had seemed invincible moments before were torn apart by the newcomers' weapons. Whoever they are, he said with amazement, they're on our side. The tide of battle was turning, but Jake knew this was only the beginning. The trap had been sprung, but humanity hadn't arrived alone to this peace conference after all. Someone else had been watching and waiting, and now they had chosen to reveal themselves as the mysterious ships continued their assault on the hegemony fleet. Jake realized that this war was about to become something much larger than anyone had imagined. The question was whether humanity would survive long enough to find out who their unexpected allies really were. The massive unknown ships tore through the hegemony fleet like a storm through paper. Captain Jake Morrison watched in amazement as vessels that had been pounding his ship moments before were reduced to burning. Wreckage by weapons more powerful than anything he had ever seen. Captain, his communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from the laid unknown vessel. The main screen flickered, and Jake found himself looking at an alien unlike any in the hegemony. This creature was massive, with gray-black skin that looked like armor plating. Its eyes were golden and intelligent, and when it spoke, its voice was deep and commanding. Human vessel, this is War Chief Garntuk of the Korath Syndicate. Do not be afraid. We are here to honor our agreement. Jake blinked in confusion. Agreement? What agreement? But before the alien could answer, another voice came over the radio from somewhere on the U.E.'s Liberty. Captain Morrison, this is Colonel Steve Parker. I can explain everything. Jake spun around, trying to figure out where the voice was coming from. Colonel Parker? I don't have anyone by that name on my ship. I've been aboard since you left Earth, sir. Deep cover mission. I need to come to the bridge immediately. Minutes later, a man in a standard crew uniform entered the bridge. Jake had seen him around the ship, but assumed he was just another technician. Now the man stood straighter and carried himself like the military officer he claimed to be. Colonel Parker, Special Operations Division, the man said, showing Jake his real identification. I've been working on this mission for 6 months. Jake stared at the ID, then at the battle raging outside his windows. What mission? What's going on here? Colonel Parker moved to the communications console and began entering codes that Jake didn't recognize. We knew the hegemony might try something like this. Admiral Hayes and I have been in secret contact with the Korath Syndicate for months. On the main screen, War Chief Garntuk was still waiting for a response. Colonel Parker activated the COM system. War Chief, this is Parker. Execute Operation Starfall. The massive alien's golden eyes seemed to glow brighter. Understood, Parker Human. We will show these hegemony fools what happens when they threaten our allies. The Korath ships spread out across the battlefield with military precision that impressed even General Sullivan, who was watching from the crystal chamber on the moon's surface. Each Korath vessel was a work of art and engineering, with curved hulls that seemed to flow like water, but were obviously tougher than any armor. Ambassador Kethter was frantically giving orders to his remaining ships, but the Zephyrian fleet was being systematically destroyed. The Korath weapons fired beams of pure plasma that cut through enemy shields like they weren't even there. Dr. Nathan Blake was recording everything he could see from the chamber. Incredible, he whispered. Their technology is at least 50 years ahead of anything the hegemony has. In the crystal chamber, the alien delegates were no longer looking confident. The Thrakari representative was actually shaking as he watched his people's ships being destroyed. The other hegemony species looked just as terrified. This is impossible, Kethter said, his musical voice now high with panic. The Korath have been neutral for centuries. They don't involve themselves in other species' wars. Colonel Parker's voice came through the chamber's communication system. They do when they have common enemies, Ambassador. The Korath have their own reasons for wanting the hegemony defeated. On the Liberty's bridge, Jake was getting a crash course in galactic politics that no human had ever received before. Colonel Parker was explaining while he coordinated with the Korath fleet. The Korath Syndicate controls territory on the far side of hegemony space, Parker said. They're older and more advanced than any of the hegemony races, but they prefer to keep to themselves. So why are they helping us? Jake asked. Because both humans and Korath have encountered the same threat at the galaxy's edge. An ancient species called the Devourers. They consume entire star systems, leaving nothing behind but empty space. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. How do you know about this? 3 human exploration ships encountered Devourer scouts last year. Only 1 ship made it back, and the crew was barely alive. Around the same time, the Korath lost 2 of their outer colonies to similar attacks. The battle around Kepler 438b was turning into a complete rout. Half the hegemony fleet had been destroyed, and the rest were trying to escape. But the Korath ships were faster as well as more powerful. Lieutenant Danny Foster, Jake's tactical officer, was coordinating target data with the Korath vessels. Despite never having worked with alien allies before, the cooperation was remarkably smooth. The Korath think like soldiers, Foster reported to Jake. Their tactics are different from ours, but they understand battlefield coordination. Dr. Blake had managed to use his scientific equipment to scan the Korath ships from the chamber. What he discovered was both exciting and terrifying. Their vessels aren't just more advanced, he told the others. They're designed for fighting something much more dangerous than the hegemony. Look at these armor readings. These ships are built to survive attacks that would vaporize anything we've ever built. Meanwhile, back at Earth, Admiral Patricia Hayes was receiving the best news she'd heard in months. The Korath hadn't just appeared at Kepler 438b. Their fleets had emerged throughout human space, arriving just in time to counter the hegemony's coordinated attack. Amy Watson, who had been trying to warn everyone about the trap for weeks, was now working frantically to coordinate human and Korath forces. Her expertise in alien communications was suddenly invaluable for translating between species. Admiral, Amy reported, the Korath are saying they can help us track down the remaining hegemony fleets. Their sensors are much better than ours. A tide of war had turned completely. What had been humanity's darkest hour was becoming the hegemony's worst nightmare. The trap they had set had become their own destruction. On Kepler 438b, the energy shields around the alien delegates finally failed as Dr. Blake successfully overloaded the power grid. General Sullivan immediately took the hegemony represented into custody. You're all prisoners of war, Sullivan told them. And trust me, after what you tried to do today, you're lucky we're not the Korath. I have a feeling they're not as forgiving as humans. Ambassador Kefter looked up at the general with fear in his large black eyes. You don't understand what you've done. By allying with the Korath, you've made yourselves targets of forces you cannot imagine. Claire Roberts was finally beginning to understand the larger picture. You mean the Devourers. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You are trying to eliminate humanity before we could ally with the Korath against a common enemy. Kefter's silence was answer enough. War Chief Garntok's massive form appeared on every screen in the chamber as he addressed both the human delegation and the captured hegemony leaders. The alliance between Korath and humanity begins today, the War Chief announced. Together, we will face the darkness that comes from the galaxy's edge. The hegemony chose to be enemies when they could have been allies. Now they will face the consequences of that choice. As the last hegemony ships fled the battlefield, Jake Morrison realized that humanity had just gained the most powerful allies in the galaxy. But he also understood that this was only the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous conflict. The real enemy was still out there, in the dark between the stars. And soon both humans and Korath would need to stand together against a threat that could destroy everything they cared about. 3 weeks after the battle at Kepler 438b, Captain Jake Morrison stood in the main conference room of Earth Station 1, watching history being made for the second time in a month. But this time, the peace treaty being signed was real. The hegemonies. 5 member species sat at one side of the long table, their leaders looking nothing like the confident delegates who had tried to trick humanity. The Zephyrians, Thrakari, and others had been completely defeated. Their fleets were scattered, their leadership discredited, and their alliance broken. Ambassador Claire Roberts sat across from them, no longer the hopeful diplomat who had walked into a trap 3 weeks ago. The betrayal had changed her, made her harder and more careful. But she was still committed to finding a real peace, even with enemies who who had tried to destroy our people. The terms are simple, Claire said, reading from the new treaty document. All hegemony military forces will be reduced to defensive levels only. No species may maintain more than 50 warships. All aggressive actions against human or Korith space will result in immediate retaliation. The former Zephyrian ambassador, Kethter, now a prisoner, listened with hatred in his black eyes. "You cannot trust the Korith," he said bitterly. "They are older and more ruthless than you can imagine. One day they will turn on you as well." War Chief Garntuk, who was attending the ceremony by hologram from his flagship, made a sound that might have been laughter. "Speak for yourself, Zephyrian. The Korith honor their agreements. It is why we have survived for 5,000 years, while empires like yours rise and fall." Dr. Nathan Blake was taking notes on everything, still amazed at how much the galaxy had changed in just a few weeks. He had learned more about alien biology and culture in the past month than in his entire previous career. "War Chief," Dr. Blake said, "may I ask about the Devourers? How long have your people been fighting them?" The massive alien's golden eyes grew darker. "For 3 centuries, human Blake. They consumed 17 of our outer colonies before we learned to fight them effectively. They are not like other enemies. They do not want territory or resources. They simply consume everything in their path." General Rick Sullivan had been studying Korith military tactics and was impressed despite himself. "How do you fight something like that?" "With great difficulty," Garntuk replied. "The Devourers use technology we do not fully understand. They can move through space in ways that ignore normal physics, but they can be stopped if you know their weaknesses." Colonel Steve Parker, whose secret mission had helped save humanity, was now working openly to coordinate the new Human-Korith alliance. "The War Chief is being modest," Parker said. "The Korith have developed weapons and tactics specifically designed to fight the Devourers. That's why their ships are so much more advanced than anything the hegemony had." Jake had spent the last 3 weeks learning about his new allies. The Korith were indeed older and more advanced than humans, but they were also honorable in ways that reminded him of the best human military traditions. They kept their word, protected their allies, and fought with discipline rather than cruelty. Lieutenant Danny Foster had been working with Korith tactical officers to establish joint patrol routes throughout what had been the war zone. "They're good soldiers," Foster reported to Jake. "Different from us, but they understand duty and sacrifice." Admiral Patricia Hayes, who was attending the peace ceremony from Earth, addressed both the defeated hegemony and the human delegation. "This treaty will be enforced by joint human-Korith patrols. Any violation will be met with immediate response." The signing took place without ceremony. Each hegemony leader pressed their appendage to the document, formally accepting defeat and the terms of surrender. When it was done, they were escorted to transport ships that would take them back to their home worlds. After the hegemony delegates were gone, the real meeting began. War Chief Garntuk's hologram became more detailed as he activated a secure communication system. "Now we must speak of the true threat," the War Chief said. "Our scouts report increased Devourer activity near the Galactic Rim. They are preparing something larger than any previous attack." Amy Watson, who had become the head of Human-Korith Intelligence Coordination, displayed star charts showing the affected areas. "We're seeing probe attacks in 17 different sectors. It's like they're testing our defenses." Dr. Blake studied the data with growing concern. If the Devourers had been consuming star systems for centuries, why are they becoming more active now? "Because they have consumed most of the galaxy's outer rim," Garntuk explained. "Now they must move inward, toward the more populated regions. They will encounter stronger resistance, so they are being more careful in their approach." Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "How long do we have?" "Hour." Best estimates suggest 2 years before they begin major operations against civilized space, the war chief replied. We must use that time to prepare both our species for the greatest war in galactic history. Ambassador Roberts looked at the star charts showing devourer activity. Will the hegemony species help us fight them? Some will, Garntuk said. Fear of extinction can overcome even the deepest hatred, but others will try to make their own deals with the devourers, not understanding that such creatures cannot be reasoned with. Over the following weeks, the new alliance began to take shape. Human and Korath scientists worked together to understand devourer technology. Military officers from both species trained together, learning new tactics and strategies. Dr. Blake established a joint research facility on Luna, where human and Korath scientists could work side by side. The cultural differences were significant, but both species shared a commitment to survival and a respect for scientific truth. The Korath have been generous with their knowledge, Dr. Blake reported to Admiral Hayes. They're sharing technology that took them centuries to develop. That's not something allies do lightly. Colonel Parker was now in charge of overall alliance coordination. The war chief explained their philosophy to me, he told Jake during one of their regular meetings. The Korath believe that the strongest metal is made by combining different elements. They think our different approaches to warfare will make us stronger together. Jake had been given command of the 1st Joint Human Korath Patrol Squadron. It was an honor that came with enormous responsibility. His ships would be the first to encounter devourer scouts, and how well the alliance worked in practice would depend largely on how well his crews could fight alongside their alien partners. The 1st Joint Patrol departed from Earth 6 weeks after the peace signing. Jake stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, now equipped with Korath-designed sensors and weapon systems. Beside his ship flew the Korath vessel Endless Honor, commanded by battle leader Vekmar. Human Morrison, came Vekmar's voice over the comm system. It is an honor to fight beside your people. The Korath have an old saying, the star that shines alone burns out quickly, but stars that shine together can light the entire galaxy. Jake smiled as he looked out at the stars ahead of them. Somewhere in that darkness, ancient enemies were preparing for war. But humanity was no longer alone. They had found allies among the stars, and together they would face whatever threats emerged from the galaxy's edge. Acknowledged, battle leader, Jake replied. Let's go show the universe what humans and Korath can accomplish together. The ships jumped into hyperspace, carrying the hopes of 2 species toward an uncertain but shared future. Behind them, Earth continued to change as human and Korath engineers worked together to build defenses against enemies that consumed entire star systems. The peace treaty had been a trap, but in the end, it had given humanity something more valuable than safety. It had given them allies worthy of trust and a chance to stand against the darkness that threatened everything they cared about. War was coming, but this time, humanity would not face it alone.